What's going on, guys? Happy Monday, everyone. It is April 6th. This is now the fourth day of the 30-day mini-series where I'm going to bring a guest on to talk real estate, all things coronavirus, and kind of give you guys a little bit of flavor on what's going on in everybody's different sector. So tonight we have Eric Braun on, or as he likes to call himself and brand himself, Not Your Average Lender. And he's going to come on and give us some insight into what the mortgage space is like for the residential side, maybe just in Long Island or just in general, and kind of give some stuff and some of his feedback. So he's on now. Eric, thanks for joining us, bud. Yeah, so you don't mute the actual Zoom audio, just mute your speakers.
Gotcha. Perfect.
All right, cool. Yeah, guys, so for anybody watching on IG Live, just as Eric kind of finished that up, we are recording all these conversations on Zoom, so you can go up and watch it on YouTube after the fact. If you want to go check out the last two ones we recorded, go into the link in my bio, check out my YouTube channel. You can see them there. Unfortunately, the one with Farber wasn't being recorded because I messed up the audio, so maybe we'll do a part two with him in 25, 30 days or something like that. So check it out tonight or tomorrow. This will be up there. And as we go on, they'll all be there. But awesome. So Eric, can you very quickly, I gave you a little introduction, but can you tell people, who you are, where you're from, what you do, just a little bit of context on you.
Absolutely. So again, my name is Eric Braun, aka Not Your Average Lender. I am a mortgage professional, a loan officer for residential financing, so residential real estate, anything from 4 units and below. Based in Long Island, my office is in Garden City, and my mission statement is to remove average from real estate by adding value to consumers and other real estate professionals.
I love that. So, yeah, I think you do a really good job of leveraging social media to create awareness around your job and the service you provide and things like that. So just touch a minute or two, if you don't mind, on that, because I think it's interesting before we get into stuff. When did you decide to do it? How has that process been like, and all that good stuff?
Cool. So yeah, everybody sees and if I get out of the camera frame, just know I have a brand new puppy, so he's
awesome.
He's a handful, but yeah, everybody sees the finished product here on Instagram. But to be honest, it's a long road to build a brand in social media in general. It's all about consistency. So about 3 years ago now, I decided to not only take social media seriously, but my business seriously. And I doubled down on social media. I figured if my goal is to help the most people, I have to be where the most people are. And as we all know, and at this point, it's 2020. That's not a secret. It's social media, right?
Yeah.
So, I realized that social media was the new internet.
Yeah,
I told you.
Yeah, I think
he's going to be a handful.
It's all good. No, I think too many people see social media. Oh my God.
He's made so many appearances in live videos, and it's not because I'm trying to show him off, but it's because I got to keep him under control.
I hear you. What's his name?
Here, let me put him in the cage. No, then he'll bark more. His name is Casanova.
Okay, cool. Don't worry about it. People they'll probably like the dog better if they do it. So awesome. I think important point is there's still too big of a distinction between like the internet and social media, when it's like, hey, like social media is just a new interface for the internet. They're not two separate things. So I think more and more people are starting to realize that, but awesome to hear that from you. So can you talk a little bit about, you're in Long Island as well. So obviously I know what's been happening. But can you talk a little bit about, from your perspective, what it's been like the last few weeks, what it's been like for your business, your work, and how you've kind of adapted over the last couple of weeks?
So I think the general state of the union is New York is getting hit with this pretty hard. So for the people outside of New York, I'd first say that, hospitals, everything it's a taxing time for sure. But as far as like business goes and let's say personally how this is affecting me, number one, I am an introvert because I need to be alone to recharge, but I am also very social, and I do enjoy being around people. So me personally, I'm going a little crazy. I feel like there's no separation in my day. Like I wake up and I'm at work, and I, definitely have to learn how to turn it off since I am working from this exact spot all day.
Right.
But as far as business goes, I've actually never been this busy in my life, in my career. I have a lot of loans in the pipeline, mainly refinances.
Okay.
Because rates dipped down for a good minute, and they're still pretty low. So because of that, I'm all right. My business is all right. We're busy. We have a really nice pipeline going. But as far as purchases, I know real estate agents are, a lot of them are not really trying to show houses right now. I think Cuomo said they can't. So they're relying on virtual showings, which we'll see how effective that is for first-time home buyers, at least, because that's 90% of my business. But I would be lying if I told you I wasn't worried about the next 60 to 90 days if this stuff doesn't clear up.
Okay. So,
to put it frank.
What worries you for the next 60 to 90 days?
New purchases.
Right.
So houses being sold. If this stuff doesn't clear up,
Right.
if they, say, hey, let's go back to normal life in 30 days, I think the market's going to be fine. The fundamentals of the market right now are very, very strong. Supply, demand, rates being low, affordability, everything is like very strong that in that sense. I think what people have to realize is this isn't a financial crisis, it's a health crisis, and it's affecting the financial system. But if they get it under control, obviously there's going to be no effect on the financial system, besides some businesses that are going to get hurt from this long time. And I'm not glancing over that, but I mean real estate specifically. I think we should be fine. Remaining positive.
Yeah, it was really interesting. We recorded a podcast with Braun, who I'm sure you know pretty well, which will actually be out tomorrow. And he talked a lot about like the market and especially, obviously Long Island and what he sees and stuff like that. And he gave some great insight. So anybody watching, if you want to go check that out, it'll be out on the 7th. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think, one thing that we talked about was there's going to be a really good swarm of like first-time home buyers in like the next 6 months. So one quick question, then a second longer question. Prior to this, what was the makeup of your business for new purchases and refinances, and ballpark percentage-wise? And then what has it shifted to?
I'd say
high level.
Say 70-30 purchase refi, and now it's the complete opposite.
Gotcha.
Just not because of a shrink in not because of a less purchases, just because of more refis.
Okay.
That makes sense.
No, it does.
It does. So that's where we're at right now. And, I think for the foreseeable future, rates are going to stay nice. So we're still going to have that refi market. Something also to mention when it comes to refis is not only rates, but equity is at an all-time high. So, I mean, because of those two things, I think refi business will stay around for a little bit.
Yeah. And then that's awesome. I think that's interesting to hear. And then two, I guess the question I had, what was I thinking? How have rates changed over the last 4 weeks? Because I know from our side, on the commercial side, rates came down crazy low. And then as things got really choppy in the market, even though the treasuries were still very low, which is the index a lot of them use, the spreads went up, and you're not seeing as much of a discount as you were 4 weeks ago. So I'm curious if it's very similar or how much it's changed. Like, can you give like a high level, like ballpark rates? Like I'll give you, it was probably like, older than 2 months ago, you were probably borrowing money for a stable property in decent markets at like low 4% for commercial multifamily stuff. And then it dropped down into like the lowest I saw was like just under 3 and like low 3s and maybe even mid 3s, just depending upon the property. And then now what I've heard is it's back up into that low 4% range. So it's almost bounced straight back to where it was prior to the treasuries falling because spreads have gotten crazy. And I'm curious to hear how similar it is in the residential market.
It's very similar. I'll tell you, like when this first announced, when it first got bad, right? We've seen the lowest rates in 50 years.
Right.
That was the exact statistic. People were being quoted high 2s on a 30-year mortgage for a fixed rate.
Gotcha.
Which is incredibly low. Then what we saw happen was because of capacity, because there was such a flood of business within a 3-day period, investors started to tick rates up to kind of push business away because they couldn't handle all of it.
Gotcha.
Then capacity wasn't really the issue. Well, it still was, but we saw them tick up and then extreme volatility. I mean, talking like you quoted an interest rate in the high 3s or low 3s at 11 a.m. and then 2 p.m. comes around and it's a 4.5. You know, like investors in the market didn't know how to respond to what was going on. The general, signal is like you mentioned, the treasury yield, the 10-year, we go off the 10-year. So usually when the 10-year drops, so do interest rates, so do residential mortgage rates. But all of a sudden, because of what was going on and because of the fact that nobody has ever seen something like this before and the fact that we don't know the industry didn't know how to respond to it, on top of capacity and liquidity, all of a sudden the rates weren't following those traditional signals. So rates started to skyrocket and they were really bad for, I'm going to say like 48 hours. I'm talking about high 5s. I'm talking about high 5s. So I actually saw on Bankrate, which is like I use their mortgage calculator from time to time. So I go to a Bankrate mortgage calculator and I saw a bank advertising a 5.875.
Wow.
And this was for a regular mortgage. So that died. The way the Fed and the government responded to that volatility was the quantitative easing that we saw. So now the Fed, the government sees that this is a huge issue, right? So they see that banks. Go ahead.
Just give a 1 to 2 minute highlight of what they did for anybody that doesn't know. Just so people know what you're talking about.
So they announced that they were going to buy basically an unlimited supply of mortgage-backed securities and bonds. Because of that, the bond yield went down again. Now I think last time I checked, it was like 0.6, which I don't know if it's ever broke below 1%. And I know this is kind of high level stuff, but basically when money floods into bonds, when the government announced that they were buying more mortgage-backed securities, now these banks have cash again to lend, and we saw rates come back down to what I think is a healthy normal. Now rates are still mid 3s, which is, I think, a healthy market.
And I think the way I understand it, because this is something that I'm still not super familiar with, is the way like the bond market. I've never really fully understood how that works because like mortgage-backed securities and people sell securities. And from what I understand, basically is like the banks you go out and lend from, they don't want to hold these mortgages. They want to originate these mortgages and then sell them for a slightly a premium basically. So like if they originated at 4, they'll sell it to someone for a 3.5 or something like that, or 3.8, right? And basically when they sell it, they get their money back, and then they also continue to collect the spread on that mortgage that was originated. And basically this is a way to continue to do business, continue to generate loan origination fees, as well as then collect the spread on both. Correct. Right? So it's that secondary market.
Banks need to stay liquid in order to keep lending money, right? And there's the whole Dodd-Frank where a bank now needs to keep 10% of their deposit. So if a bank has, $1,000 in it, they need to keep $100 at all times. Because of that, sometimes banks can run into liquidity problems. We saw that in quarter 3 when everybody was trying to pay taxes. Then the Fed prints more money, then that leads to inflation. There's definitely, it's a whole nother world.
Yeah.
Like it's a whole nother world. It's a whole nother industry, the secondary market. But for how I always boil it down is, you have these big investors, right, that are trying to hit certain marks on their portfolio. They're trying to see a certain amount of profit, right? When this is usually how it works. When the stock market tanks, what do investors want to do to protect their bottom line? They want to pull out of the stock market, but still have their money work for them and put it into bonds, which is a very safe investment. It's a very safe, low yielding investment. Now, when we see that happen, when money comes out of the stock market and a bunch is pumped into bonds, the bond yield goes down, and so do interest rates usually. What we saw was very, very different. We saw the lowest bond ever, and all of a sudden the highest rates that we've seen in a few years. And then the government started buying bonds and announced that they were buying mortgage-backed securities, which helped with liquidity, and rates are back to normal for conventional loans. Now what we're seeing, the biggest issue that the mortgage industry is seeing right now is on government loans, meaning FHA, VA, USDA, right? A lot of investors have switched their minimum credit score requirements and maximum debt to income ratio to requirements to be a lot more conservative. So a lot of investors right now are not taking below a 640 credit score on FHA, VA, and USDA loans. And if they are, the pricing is not favorable. And the reason that is because investors realize that those are the loans, FHA, VA, USDA, the types of borrowers that are taking those loans are most likely going to be the ones to default first when they get laid off.
Right.
So that's why a lot of investors are not pricing FHA, VA, and USDA loans very well, and they're raising their requirements because now everybody's afraid of unemployment.
Yes.
Now that liquidity was kind of solved, the government announced that they were buying stuff in the secondary market. People are worried. The banks are worried now that they're not going to pay the mortgages. So they're adjusting guidelines for that. We're still operating off regular guidelines. Am I going to say you're going to get the best interest rate when you are at a certain credit score right now? No. But what we're doing a lot, and this is kind of what separates us, is we're figuring out ways to boost people's credit. We're, get them in the 700 so they get something ideal, or we're figuring out a way to go conventional and stay away from FHA, VA, and USDA if we can.
Gotcha. So just as a reference, you said a 640 credit score for those programs. What would that number have been prior to this stuff?
FHA, will allow you to go down to 500 with compensating factors.
Gotcha.
Usually 580
is
like the cutoff. But if you are a person with 10% down, and they'll allow you to go pretty low.
Gotcha. So a pretty big swing is basically what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah. I think if anybody's listening to this right now, whether it's live, recorded, or whatever, don't get overwhelmed by like the debt market and the mechanics behind it. Cause it's still, it's a big beast. It's tough to understand. It's still something I still struggle very much to understand the world of. So anything you've heard that you don't understand, take some time, just look it up, rewatch it a couple of times, or just continue to watch stuff, because you pick a little bit up over time. Even myself, and I've been doing this for 3.5, 4 years, and I like to think I have a pretty decent grasp on things, and the debt world is still something I don't fully understand. So
there's certain principles. There's certain principles that, like, I would think, you would understand and I get, but then there's a whole nother, it's literally a whole separate industry. So that's why I try to keep it simple, but sometimes it's hard to keep it simple.
Nah, for sure. And I thought it was really interesting to hear you talk about the banks nervous who's going to pay, because that's something we're going through with the multifamily stuff right now. It's even who's going to pay, and if you can't foreclose or you can't evict people, there are people that are going to take advantage of that situation and try to work something out or negotiate later. And then I also thought it was interesting was because right now they have the SBA loans for like payroll and different things like that people are applying for the banks. And I was watching a video, and I wish I remember the guy's name because I tell everybody to listen to it. Maybe I'll find it and do a swipe up story. But Bank of America was doing these loans, and on their application, only if you had a credit card, an existing loan, or one other thing where it's like very similar to a loan, were they telling you that you could go out and get these programs. Because basically, as a small business, if you've got a $2 million loan with Bank of America, they're now concerned that you're not going to be able to pay it back. So, hey, we'll give you money to support your payroll, because they know you're going to turn around and give it right back to them for their mortgages. So they were very concerned. And then, people started complaining. The government stepped in and said, that's not how the program was designed. You can't do that. But I mean, even, for our banks and stuff like that, they're going to be given tremendous preferential treatment to anybody that's got a loan outstanding with them or a credit card or whatever, because obviously, they want to get paid. They want to earn their interest. They don't want to take over properties, businesses, stuff like that. That's not what it's not what it's designed for. They're not operators. They're not going to do nearly as well of a job as the person running it for the most part, 98% of the time. So, I think it's really interesting to hear, that side of everything play out. And I think that's why you're seeing so many like forbearance and, forgiveness programs and things like that, because it's, one, it's, you have to, and two, it's, what are you going to do? Right. Like from the multifamily side, if all of a sudden now, banks got, $1 billion worth of loans out there, and that's, just call it 10,000 units. They don't have the infrastructure to foreclose on people and take over operations for 10,000 units. So it's way cheaper over 2 years to say, hey, we'll forgive these loans for 3 months.
Right.
Because for the cost for us to actually come in and foreclose and then get people in place to operate, it just doesn't even make financial sense. So, not only like the government mandating it kind of, it just makes financial sense as well.
I think what the government is doing a poor job when it comes to this topic is making it seem like forbearance is free, right? They're not portraying the message, very well. They're saying you don't need to make your mortgage payments. That's not the full story. First off, you have to prove that you're out of work.
Yep.
Because of this. Then you have to realize that it's not, you don't have to make your 3 months payment. It's we're gonna hold off. You still got to pay that money. So I'm recommending anybody who's listening that is a homeowner or and you're still working, or let's say if you're not working, make sure you get something in writing from your servicer. Make sure you're able to prove you're out of work. Make sure you get the full details. Make sure you ask them, is it going to hurt my credit? Because the last thing we want to do, or we want to happen, is everybody goes late on their mortgage for 3 months, right? And then down the line, they can't buy a home or refinance or get credit cards. And this is what we've seen in 08, 09. Yes, everybody was unemployed, and there were a lot of programs that allowed people and gave them, the ability to not make the mortgage payment. But then you had that modification companies coming out and saying, hey, you don't need to make your mortgage payment, to somebody who was on time, still at work, and who could and was very capable of making the mortgage payment. And because they listened to that company and they dragged out the process for 6 months trying to get a modification, and then that modification was denied, people lost their houses. Or down the line, they couldn't refinance, or they couldn't take advantage of lower rates. So do your due diligence. Make sure you speak to your mortgage servicer before you just stop making the payment.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because when they announced because the forbearance for the commercial side was probably, I want to say like 4 to 7 days behind the residential side. And when they first announced it, it was like, great, they moved it to commercial. But then it was like, hey guys, you can take it, but there's going to be a mark on your record. That's what everyone was saying. And it was like, okay, like, hold up, like there's going to be a mark. Like, if I want to go get a loan in, 3 years, when you do a loan application for commercial, it's one of the questions they ask is, have you ever done a loan modification? Have you ever done forbearance? that's a question on, at least on the Fannie Freddie side. I don't know for sure on like the bridge and CMBS side. I would assume it's there too, but I don't know for sure. And they were saying like, hey guys, like whatever. And then it was funny. Then their tone swiftly changed. Like, then first it was presented as a negative. Then very quickly it got presented as like, hey guys, like anybody who doesn't take forbearance, like we'll remember our good partners. And we just laughed because we were like, come on, like what is it? You remember your good partners? Like, what are you going to do in 3 years? You're not going to give me 50 basis points discount because I was a good partner. And then within a few days, it was like, hey guys, there's not going to be, like if you take forbearance and you can prove it, there's not going to be a mark. But then they said, but just know you're going to have a ton of paper. Like they always have to throw like a hurdle in your way. Like you said, they don't want people not paying just because they don't want to.
Just because they heard a governor or whoever else say that they didn't have to. Because that's what you have to remember. Like the governor is not collecting your payment. They don't hold your debt. You got to speak with the people who hold your debt,
It's important. Like I think too, it was in that same video I was watching. I'll have to find it again. I'll throw it up as a link on Instagram or something, but because he was very interesting. He was a Long Island guy, actually, I think, or a New York guy. He was saying like, as great as like Cuomo's done, and this is like everybody I've spoken to has been very favorable for Cuomo, and anybody who doesn't know, Cuomo's the governor of New York currently. And the one thing he had a problem with is like, hey, this is a health crisis first, and we'll figure out the economic stuff later. And it's like, that sounds great, but if I'm a small business owner and, he said like, I think I'm going to pay like 10 people or 15 people, we'll figure it out later. That's not good enough for me. Like, I'm not going to just trust that the government is going to take care of my economic well-being in the future. Like, hey, you scratch my back today, I'll scratch your back tomorrow. That's a really tough situation to take.
I mean, his base is not small business owners.
Yeah.
That's usually not the people voting for him. So.
No, and I get it. Look, and there's only so much you can do, right? Like you're going to put it in place, but you are creating a program around the small business owners of like, hey guys, do us a favor, keep all your people on. And if you do that throughout, you can then turn this loan into a grant and you don't have to pay back the interest, or I think even the
principal.
The principal. So like that's attractive, which is like a good plan to put in place. Like that's incentive to keep people on payroll and benefits and blah, blah, blah. So I do think that was interesting where it's like, we got to be careful that people actually think about the economic consequences of the actions you're taking. So like take forbearance if you need it, but don't be so quick to take it and just be like, oh, it's free money, because you're going to have to pay it back, whether it's tacked on the end or it's like amortized in the next 12 months. All different programs are going to do different things. Make sure you understand what it's going to be. But yeah, you got to make sure you understand the consequences. Like if on the residential side, it's going to be, a mark against you, better be worth it, right? If you can afford to pay, great. It's the same thing with rent, right? If you don't want to pay, you technically don't have to right now. Nothing's going to happen. But if, eviction halts, unfreeze in 90 days, you're still going to be on the hook for that money. And you're going to have to come up with some sort of payment plan or something else.
Right.
Or, there's going to be an eviction filed. And, a judge isn't going to go, oh, well, you didn't have to pay, magically disappears. That's so far, that's not what's in place. Granted, it could change and there could be some sort of, rent forgiveness program they decide to throw together. I have no idea how that would work. But yeah, I don't foresee that happening. I mean, we were just talking about it today. The unemployment benefits they've put together are pretty tremendous, actually. Like they basically the way they broke it down was like they took the average unemployment benefit that someone would get, and they said like they took the median salary, which I think is like 60K or 50K in the US nationwide. And they said like, okay, what's the average difference between like, let's say it was 60 and unemployment gave you like 30 or 25. And they said, what's the amount per week that would get it up? And they came up with that $600 a week number. So like if you made, sorry, I just had a low battery come up. So if you made, like 25K a year, you're actually coming out ahead because they're going to like backfill you to get you up with that $600 a week. But if you made like 100K or 120K, you're going to actually come out below because you're only getting that 600 a week. So they didn't like adjust it for like area and stuff like that. So like some people are going to do great and some people are going to still have to like shave some off, but it's still way better than it would have been. So I think, I don't think from the payment of, you know, housing, whether it's mortgage, taxes, rent, renter's insurance, whatever, I personally don't think it's going to get as crushed. And we've actually started seeing that. So in our collections, we're right at where we've been on average by the 5th of the month or very damn close to it. You know, only a couple percentage points lower. Do I think it'll be the same through the end of the month? No, it'll probably be, you know, 3 to 10% lower than what our usual collections are, but it's not going to be like, the 0% collections that people thought it was, because these, you know, things are in place. And that's not even including the $1,200 they're going to be sending people, or, you know, 1,200 or that, you know, like it changes based on your income. So, yeah, I would definitely be very hesitant to just do forbearance because you can. So I think that's crucial. Just from a, you know, I know you touched a little bit on the personal side. What else have you been doing during this period? Just from like a business personal side, like, you know, you talked a little bit about going into the refinance, but like, are you doing anything else that you think might benefit other people? Like, I know we're doing a lot of internal stuff that has fallen by the wayside during this time. And then besides getting a puppy, is there anything personally that you're doing to try to, you know, stay sane, stay motivated, stuff like that?
Absolutely. So my whole thing is like how I separate myself from, let's say, other loan officers. Obviously, what you have to do whenever you're some sort of professional or business owner, you have to figure out how to separate yourself, right? So what I did 3 years ago is I took a look at my industry. I took a look at other loan officers, what they were doing to build their businesses. And I saw a very big flaw, which is a lot of loan officers are, you know, going out there, forming relationships with, let's say, realtors or other real estate professionals, and they're the only ones benefiting from that relationship. So what I did is I want to flip the script. Like I said in the beginning, my mission statement is to remove average from real estate by adding value to real estate professionals and consumers, right? So I wanted to flip the script and say, all right, what can I do to help my referral partners? I don't call them my real estate agents. Referral partners win in their business. So one thing that I'm doing right now, and the reason I say all of that is I'm together a video series called Producer Plateau. And it's going to be tips, tricks, and strategies that you can implement while staying home to keep your business moving forward. Cass, come here. So I actually just posted the table of contents, if you will. I have 10 tips and tricks that I'm going to be recording over the next few weeks, and putting them out like every other day probably. So the first 2 videos I'll tell you guys is past client marketing. I think that's one of the most important things that we could do right now as real estate professionals. I think now is the time to tell your past clients or show your past clients how much you care. Not how much, you know, not worry about getting in the next deal necessarily. So that's going to be a 2-part video because I think there's a lot to cover there. And then we're going over everything from how to keep a good mindset to overcome objectives from or fears of consumers right now. We're doing a video on that. Virtual showings, video content ideas, the state of the market. There's a bunch of different. So if you go to my profile right now, you'll see my most recent post is the table of contents where I kind of outlined what we're going to be covering over the next few weeks.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, I think now's a really great time to look at some things that maybe, you know, you thought, you know, I can do it in the future, or, you know, I don't have the time to do because I got, you know, business, or I'm trying to build, and, you know, I can build it slower. You know, people have significantly more free time now, just commute alone, right? Take out, New York, the average commute's probably 45 minutes, if not more each way. That's a ton of time you can throw at trying something new, whether it's social or, getting in touch with past clients or, just touching base with potential clients. Even just, reaching out with family and stuff like that. I mean, it's a great opportunity.
One of the videos is complete the busy tasks.
Yeah.
So we're going to be going over a few things that you have the time to do now. Like there's no excuse, right? And I know for me, there's been projects on my list for a year that I was supposed to complete, but because we're so active, I'm active doing loans, real estate agents are active showing houses and getting listings. It's hard to do those things. So now is the time to complete that. And I, the other night, it's like I was saying before, it's sometimes right now, because I'm working from home, it's hard to turn off or hit the off switch. I was working till 5 a.m. writing an email campaign.
Yeah.
Like that's what I was doing because now I have the time.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a little excessive, but that's just one example of one thing that you could do with your time right now, since you aren't showing houses specifically for realtors.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's an awesome time to do that. I know for us, we're working on, we're moving from MailChimp to Active Campaign. We're working more on integrating. We just started using Monday.com for a lot of our task management stuff beforehand, but now it's like in the last 3 weeks, we've really been able to ramp up and introduce to more of the company and integrate in other different places. We're talking about integrating Slack more just to stay on top of things. We're really taking a lot of things we've always spoken about. It's hey, especially for us, right? Because a lot of our time on a day-to-day is spent on acquisitions, always looking at new deals. Because we close on a percentage of the deals we look at. We might look at, 1,000 deals a year, and we buy 3 or 5. And some of those you take a look at and you're like, nah, this is never going to work. Swipe left real quick. But there's a ton, there's hundreds of properties we spend hours on. So, that time it's okay, we're still looking, because if the right deal came along, we would buy it. But it's deal flow has dried up significantly. I don't think sellers' expectations have taken a dive yet. So we're still in that weird space where we're not looking, but we're not hey, let's go find a deal today. Because that's our lifeblood.
That's what you need to do to keep the lights on. So integrating Slack is a priority after that. It's not first priority. So a mentor of mine said, systems or system stands for saving yourself serious time, energy, and money.
Love it.
System.
Love that. Awesome.
Yeah. So that's what that video is going to be about. And what you were just talking about is it's all about implementing systems. So I'm trying to do that to the best of my ability right now while we have the time, right?
Yeah.
Goldie asked you, how many properties do you guys own?
Yeah. So we have, let's see, we've bought about 23. We've sold about 8. So that would be what? I can't do math right now. Was that 15?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm the
15.
Guy. I don't know.
Yeah. I rely on Excel or my calculator now. Yeah. So that's 15. I always have problems with 8, 7, and 5. Adding and subtracting those 3 numbers. I don't know why I always have trouble with. But yeah.
How many units?
It's about 2,800 units, 2,500 units, give or take. I always get asked this question. I never actually do the physical math. I don't know why, but yeah. So we've got give or take 1,000 units down in Florida. We've got about 1,000, just under 1,000 in Columbus, Ohio. We got a property in Mobile, Alabama, a property in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is right by Nashville, property in Greenville, South Carolina, property in Wilmington, North Carolina. And then we got 2 mobile home parks, one down in South Carolina, one in upstate New York. So we've got a decent spread, and we have a couple different areas, but we're not worldwide or nationwide. Not yet. But that's why I like having different people on from different areas to kind of hear the impact of different areas, different industries, and somewhat in real estate or at least business and investing, because I think it's interesting to hear different people's takes and stuff like that. But yeah, I think what's your monthly rent roll goal? Almost said it. Monthly rent roll goal, I have no idea. It varies so differently from property to property. we did just get the numbers in. I said it earlier. Our collections as of the 5th is right on pace or only just slightly below where it's been on average for the last 12 months. So it's not like we've seen a big dip yet. But yeah, we're right in there. So every rent roll is different. But yeah, I think this is a great place to wrap up. Eric, thank you so much for coming on this and doing it and, sharing your experience. Obviously anyone on IG Live can, that isn't following you or doesn't know you or is not following me or doesn't know me can click on the little bubble up top and go check us out. But for the recording afterwards, where can people follow you? Where can people learn more about the business side of your things and get in touch with you and all that stuff?
I think Instagram is definitely a good place to start. So my Instagram username is Not Your Average Lender. You could also, what I'm going to be doubling down on YouTube over the next few months. So if you look up Not Your Average Lender on YouTube, I'll pop up. And then Facebook is my name. So it's Eric Braun, EricBraun.
Awesome.
And if you're a real estate professional trying to network, trying to build relationships that are, symbiotic, let's say, I definitely want to talk to you.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much for doing this. This was great. Guys, if you have any more questions and you want to, feel free, just shoot me or Eric a DM. We'll both be happy to answer you. Official Baker. I actually have a video about that up on my YouTube if you want to go check it out. I'm sure Eric's got something as well. But for anyone on IG Live, thank you for watching and come back tomorrow. I forget who we have, but we'll have somebody good. So have a good night, everyone.